Kaela adjusted the strap of her bag and glanced up at the massive, arched windows of the observation deck. Earth's surface reflected the sunlight like a glittering jewel, vivid blues and greens edged with swirling white clouds. The sight, despite their current predicament, was breathtaking. Beside her, Shil fidgeted, her luminous violet eyes locked on the planet below. "So," Shil muttered, her voice tinged with bitterness, "this is where they dump us." Kaela sighed, brushing a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "It could be worse. At least we're not being tossed into a desolate asteroid field. Earth is livable." Shil turned sharply, her expression sharp. "Livable? That's what you call it? We're prisoners, Kaela. Exiled. Stripped of everything we worked for, everything we were. And for what? Defying a tradition that doesn't even make sense anymore." Kaela remained calm, though she could feel the weight of Shil's words. She had always been the more level-headed of the two, but that didn't mean she wasn't struggling. Exile from Elath wasn't just a punishment. It was a mark of shame, a permanent stain on their records. The Council of Harmony had made their stance clear. Disobedience would not be tolerated. And for breaking one of the most sacred societal codes, they were to be removed from Elath's intricate web of structured harmony and sent to a backwater world that had barely begun to scratch the surface of interstellar diplomacy. Shil's gaze softened slightly as she watched Kaela remain composed. "How are you not angry?" "I am," Kaela admitted, meeting Shil's eyes. "But anger isn't going to help us survive. We need to adapt. Find a way to make the best of this." The hum of the ship's engines shifted, signaling their final approach. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "We're preparing to enter Earth's atmosphere. You'll be disembarking shortly." Shil clenched her fists. "They're dropping us off like cargo." Kaela placed a gentle hand on Shil's shoulder. "It's not the end. Just a new beginning. We'll face it together." Their transport module detached from the larger vessel, its stabilizers engaging as it entered the planet's upper atmosphere. The view shifted from the endless black of space to a vibrant sky, clouds streaking past as the module descended. The turbulence jolted them slightly, but Kaela kept her focus, offering Shil a reassuring smile. When the module landed, the door slid open to reveal a sunlit clearing. Tall grasses swayed gently in the breeze, and the distant sound of running water hinted at a nearby stream. Trees stretched skyward, their leaves a rich green unlike anything the two had seen on Elath. The air smelled fresh, tinged with the faint sweetness of blooming flowers. Kaela stepped out first, taking a cautious breath. "This isn't so bad." Shil followed, her boots crunching on the grass. She looked around, her expression shifting from anger to tentative curiosity. "It's different." They had landed far from any human settlement, as per the Council's instructions. Their punishment was not just to survive, but to live among Earth's inhabitants, to understand the people they had once dismissed as primitive and insignificant. The Council believed this would teach them humility and perhaps instill a greater appreciation for the values they had defied. Kaela turned to Shil. "We need to find shelter, figure out how to blend in. The Council wouldn't have sent us here if it were impossible." Shil scoffed but didn't argue. Together, they set out, their senses heightened as they ventured into the unknown. Every rustle of leaves, every bird call made them pause. The jungle-like environment was alive in ways Elath's carefully controlled ecosystems never were. It was raw, untamed, and strangely beautiful. They spent the next few hours exploring, noting landmarks and gathering what information they could. Kaela's keen eye for detail helped them identify plants that might be edible, while Shil's instinct for movement allowed her to spot potential threats before they got too close. By evening, they found a sheltered nook beneath an outcropping of rocks and decided it would serve as their temporary base. As night fell, they huddled together, sharing the last of the rations the council had allowed them to bring. The stars above were familiar yet foreign, their patterns different from the constellations of Elath's sky. Shil's initial frustration began to ebb as she watched the heavens, the vast expanse reminding her of the possibilities that lay beyond their current predicament. Kaela noticed Shil's thoughtful expression and said softly, "This place isn't all bad." Shil glanced at her. "What makes you say that?" "Look at it." Kaela gestured to the night sky, the silhouettes of trees against the starlight. "It's wild and free. There's no rigid structure, no endless rules. Just life." Shil was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe. But it still feels like a cage." "Only if we let it," Kaela replied. "The council wanted to break us, to make us regret our choices. But what if we prove them wrong? What if we show them that we can thrive here, that we don't need their approval to find meanings?" Shil gave a faint smile. "You always were the optimistic one." Kaela chuckled. "And you were always the fighter. That's why we'll get through this together." The night deepened, and the two aliens drifted off to sleep beneath the stars. Their journey on Earth was only beginning, but already the seeds of something new were taking root. They were no longer just outcasts, they were survivors, explorers, and perhaps, one day, something more. Kaela stepped onto the cobblestone street, pulling her hood lower over her glowing silver hair. The morning market in the small town was just beginning to stir, stalls unfolding their colorful canopies and merchants arranging their wares. The air carried the scent of baked bread, fresh herbs, and something distinctly earthy that Kaela couldn't quite identify. She adjusted the bag slung over her shoulder, its weight a reminder of her mission for the day. Shil trailed behind her, silent but alert. Her violet eyes scanned their surroundings, taking in the humans going about their daily routines. To the untrained eye, they were just another pair of travelers passing through, blending seamlessly into the town's bustling energy. But Kaela could sense Shil's tension, an ever-present readiness to bolt at the first sign of trouble. "Relax," Kaela murmured, glancing back at her friend. "We're fine. No one's paying us any mind." Shil's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. She kept her hands stuffed in the pockets of her jacket, the faint shimmer of her skin hidden beneath the fabric. They had been careful to conceal their true nature, wearing borrowed clothes that helped them pass as ordinary humans. The council had given them no instructions beyond surviving on Earth and learning from its people. And so they had chosen this remote town as their starting point, far from the prying eyes of larger cities or advanced surveillance. Kaela led them toward a small produce stand, where a woman in her 50s was arranging baskets of ripe fruit. The vendor greeted them with a warm smile. "Good morning. Can I interest you in some fresh peaches? Picked just yesterday." Kaela returned the smile. "They look wonderful. I'll take a dozen, please." As the woman counted out the peaches, Kaela pulled a few worn bills from her bag. The council had provided them with a modest amount of local currency, just enough to get by until they could find work. Kaela handed over the money and accepted the small cloth bag of peaches. "Thank you," she said, tucking the bag into her pack. "You're not from around here, are you?" the vendor asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. Kaela hesitated for a fraction of a second before replying, "No, we're just passing through. Exploring the countryside." Well, welcome to our little corner of the world," the woman said. "If you need anything, just let me know." "My name's Margaret." Kaela nodded. "Thank you, Margaret. We'll be sure to stop by again." They moved on, weaving through the market. Shil kept her head down, her sharp hearing picking up snatches of conversation around them. The humans talked about mundane things, weather, crops, a local festival happening next week. It was all so ordinary, so different from the carefully orchestrated harmony of Elath. Shil felt a pang of homesickness, but quickly shoved it aside. "Let's find that hardware store," Kaela said, her tone brisk. "We need a few more tools." They located the store near the edge of the market square. Inside, shelves were lined with everything from nails and hammers to gardening supplies and paint. Kaela browsed carefully, selecting items that would help them reinforce their temporary shelter back in the woods. She didn't linger too long in one place, conscious of the need to maintain their cover. While Kaela paid for the supplies, Shil wandered to a display of hand-carved wooden figurines near the counter. One figure in particular caught her eye, a small, intricately detailed horse. It reminded her of a childhood toy she'd once had on Elath. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. "Find something you like?" the shopkeeper asked, a genial man with graying hair and a kind smile. Shil blinked, then set the figurine down. "No, just looking." "Thank you." Kaela glanced at her, a flicker of understanding in her expression. "We're ready," she said, picking up the bag of supplies. They left the store and made their way back toward the woods. As they walked, Shil spoke quietly. "It's strange, isn't it? How simple their lives are. How unaffected." Kaela nodded. "That's what the council wanted us to see, I think. A world that's raw, unpolished. People living day by day, without the rigid structure we grew up with." Shil frowned. "It's unsettling. It feels vulnerable." "Maybe that's the point," Kaela said. "To understand a different kind of strength. One that comes from adapting, not controlling." The woods embraced them as they left the town behind. The dense canopy filtered the sunlight, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. Their makeshift shelter came into view, a modest structure built into a natural hollow surrounded by moss-covered rocks. It wasn't much, but it was home for now. Kaela set down the supplies and began sorting them. Shil helped, her movements precise and efficient. They worked in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Kaela broke the silence. "We're going to have to integrate more. Get jobs, interact with people." Shil looked up sharply. "You think that's wise? The more we interact, the more likely we are to slip up." "I think it's necessary," Kaela replied. "The council didn't just want us to survive, they wanted us to learn. To understand this world, its people. We can't do that if we keep hiding in the woods." Shil sighed, but she didn't argue. Instead, she picked up a hammer and began reinforcing one of the walls.
"Fine.
But we do it carefully. No unnecessary risks." "Agreed," Kaela said, her voice steady. She placed a hand on Shil's arm. "We'll be careful. We'll take it one step at a time." Shil nodded, her resolve hardening. Together, they would navigate this unfamiliar world, find their place, and prove that their exile didn't define them. They would adapt, learn, and maybe even thrive. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least they had each other. The first rays of dawn crept through the trees, casting long shadows over the small clearing that Kaela and Shil now called home. They had spent weeks piecing together a livable shelter, making use of the tools they had purchased in town and the natural resources around them. Though it was far from the structured, polished homes of Elath, it was a space they could call their own. Kaela sat on a moss-covered log near the entrance, her fingers deftly weaving a piece of netting from thin, flexible branches. She glanced up as Shil approached, carrying a small bundle of wild herbs she had gathered from the nearby forest. The faint glow of their alien complexion had become more subdued, blending into the earthy hues of their surroundings. "These should last us a few more days," Shil said, setting the herbs on a flat rock. "I'll go out again tomorrow to find more." Kaela nodded. Good. We're learning how to live here. Slowly but surely, Shil crossed her arms, leaning against a tree trunk. Do you think they're watching us? The council, I mean. Do you think they'll ever call us back? Kaela's hands stilled, the unfinished net resting in her lap. She looked at Shil thoughtfully. I used to hope for that. For some kind of signal that we'd proven ourselves and could return. But now? I don't know. Maybe that's not what this is about. Maybe we're meant to find something here that we couldn't on Elath. Shil frowned. And if we never hear from them again? If we're left here indefinitely? Kaela met her gaze, her voice steady. Then we keep going. We find our own meaning. Shil didn't reply immediately, but her expression softened. She crouched beside the herbs, sorting them into smaller bundles. It had taken her some time to accept their exile, but Kaela's calm resolve was a steady anchor. Together, they were adjusting, building a life in a world that was as alien to them as they were to it. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kaela and Shil sat by a small fire outside their shelter. The soft crackle of flames was accompanied by the distant chirping of insects and the gentle rustle of leaves. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, one of many they had learned to cherish. Kaela held a simple wooden cup filled with water they had boiled earlier. She sipped slowly, watching the flames dance. Do you remember our first day here? Shil smirked. How could I forget? You were so optimistic, it almost made me angry. Kaela laughed softly. And you were so angry, it almost made me lose my optimism. Shil shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. I guess we balance each other out. They fell into a comfortable silence, the bond between them stronger than ever. The challenges of the past weeks had tested their patience and resilience, but they had emerged more united. This world, with all its unknowns, was no longer just a punishment. It was a new chapter, one they were writing together. As the firelight flickered, Kaela reached for her netting project, her hands moving almost automatically. Shil watched her for a moment before speaking again. Do you think we'll ever really belong here? Kaela paused, considering the question. Belonging isn't about where you are. It's about who you're with and what you make of the life you have. I think we're already starting to belong. Shil's smile widened slightly. Maybe you're right. The fire crackled softly as they sat side by side, their shadows stretching into the night. The world around them was vast and unfamiliar, but it no longer felt as daunting. Together, they would continue to adapt, learn, and find meaning in the uncharted wilderness they now called home.